Brought to you by Knights of Awakening. This is the Labyrinth. So, first of all, thank you all for joining us. Today's episode is called The War Altar. So let's start out. Eventually, it's going to happen. You're going to get into a conflict with another mystic that you just can't settle any other way. Or you're going to have a battle that has to be won that you just can't afford to lose. You've tried everything. You've thrown regular curses. You've done energy work, astral projection, shamanic journey against your target. You've done your ceremonial high magic to the point at which your arms have fatigued from drawing pentagrams. You've run through so many malas that your throat is sore. So you decide you got to take it to the next level. It's war. But how do you fight a war mystically? Well, fighting a war mystically requires the ability to have some kind of knowledge of your foe. The ability to have some kind of knowledge of yourself and what you're doing. But it also requires that you have an ability to maneuver things in a way that you can keep track of them. At this point, a lot of people go to Poppet work, which is not bad. It's a great way to hurt someone. But winning a war, you've got to defend yourself as well as know where you're being hit. You need an intuitive tool that makes you better, stronger, faster on the battlefield in a mystical fight. The real battle may be business. It may be dealing with people in your day-to-day life who are trying to sabotage you. It may be former friends or allies, or it may be another mystic, in which case this is where you definitely need to be coming into this part of the show and realize that what we're going to hit on is a technique that lets you wage war. This is the war altar. Now, a war altar is a concept that a lot of people have, but not many people use the method I do. I like to combine Poppet work with my more energetic-based methods. So what I do, and this is the cheapest magic you'll ever do, okay? But it is so damn effective. What you do is you get a couple bags of army men, a couple other figurines if you can, if you have access to them. If not, work with what you've got. You might need to paint some army men for certain units and things like that. And you empower them to represent forces in play. You take one color, you empower it to your forces. You need to sit down and meditate on this for quite some time. You need to instill energy in this. You're making a Poppet for yourself. And then you need to make one for your foe as well. You need to make one for your known foe. This is best when you know you have someone coming after you, and sometimes that happens. It's not all that often, but when it does, that's where this comes into play. And then you absolutely must have a complete awareness of self to do this. This technique doesn't work without an awareness of self, because you are going to move these pieces on that battlefield, representing things that are happening to you, and then move your pieces, representing what you're doing to your foe. You must put a level of power and energy and faith into this as you would any other spell. And you can use this alongside other ritual methods. You can use this to help track how well they worked or if they were diverted by forces. You can use this to take away some of your enemy's forces and turn them to your uses, to strip them of their protections, or to strike them at the core. What we're going to hit now is a quick little video recorded with a Kindle and the god-awful low-resolution camera that it is. And I know my camera's resolution isn't all that great sometimes, but we're about to take a huge step down, sadly, and I apologize for that. It's the best that we can do given the circumstances, technology that we have available. But this will give you an idea of what you'll be looking at with a war altar, how to design it, and I'll hit a few tips in the middle of that video, and then we'll come back and I'll finish up the rest of this technique and explanations of some things to understand about it. So we're now going to the live recording. Well, it's live recording. I'm not going to edit it any further than it is. Of the war altar. Well, a mock-up war altar. This isn't my personal war altar. This is a quick mock-up, and I'll be designing one soon, because every once in a while I have a foe, and it's good to be able to track them. But this shows you how to make use of it. Again, I'll restate this in that video, and I'll restate it a couple more times through the show. If you're not putting power into this, then these are plastic figurines. So, over to the video.
Now what we have here is the war altar itself, as we were explaining the basics of it earlier, what it is. And as you'll see, I have a protective symbol laid down here. This isn't an active war altar right now, this is a mock-up. But I figured if I was going to use a mock-up, I might as well use it very similar to the last variation that was used. Had actually more materials for it in the last iteration of a war altar. We had different figurines available than just the army soldiers, and a lot of those got burnt actually in a sacrifice at the end to finalize the war. What you do with this, though, is it's very important. You have to meditate for a very long time and empower these the same way you would a Poppet. If you're not empowering this the way you would as a Poppet, the entire thing, including each figure, it's not going to do very much for you. Without empowering, these are just figures that don't do anything. You have to take the time to meditate and put power into this. If you haven't put at least a half an hour of meditation and energy work on your war altar, it's not anything except a toy at that point. The goal here is to empower these to represent the forces in play. And you have to be very honest with yourself, what you feel, what you sense. And every day or so, you update the altar. And let's say you know that your enemy has made inroads. Each of these represents something to you. Using army men, it's fairly simple. Anything that's got a gun pointing forward is an offensive force. And obviously, anything with a cannon is a much stronger force. And you can even mark when you feel that you've taken a loss. And with that, you use energies like Reiki or Qigong to restore the energies in the figurine, which represents part of your forces in this working, to then restore those over time. And you take a few minutes whenever you do that. You meditate on the figure. Take it off the battlefield and meditate on it, or even place it in a safe zone with other figures that you can designate for healing in some way. Grenade throwers probably don't mark that very well, but the command figure would be a decent choice for that, as that represents your own forces. Personal forces, that is, like personal ki and things like that. With this, honesty within what you sense of what's occurring is absolutely vital. If you are not being honest with what you sense of what is going on with this, then all you're doing is putting figures. But if you are honest, then what you can do is empower a figure and move it into a position and take ground as where you sense it, and slowly but surely wipe out an enemy's ability to do anything to you. As I said, there's a protective symbol there that I make use of somewhat here and there. And you could also use a symbol representing your enemy on their side as a castle. You might also decide to use castles and other figures as markers representing territory energetically, or representing forces in play such as alliances. This is great against someone who likes to make use of demons and familiar spirits and things like that, as each of these can represent one or more of those in play. It's great against someone who does a lot of energy work or a lot of behind the scenes work, because this represents their ability to focus and control allies in any way. So I think this is a really neat technique. It's one that I came up with years ago. It's based on Poppet work. It's based on the core concepts that are found within Poppet work and sympathetic magic. And I hope that you get something out of it. You know, it has been wildly successful for me every time I've used it. And I'm going to go back to the rest of the seated show, you know, in front of the big camera with the high resolution and all that. So, you know, see you there.
So we're back, and I've adjusted this camera to give me a slightly better picture than what I had at the start of this video. Amazing how these settings change whenever you haven't done a video in a couple of days. It seems like the software tends to default back to the crappy default. but with this adjusted, the rest of the video should look a little bit better. So I guess we're doing a sliding scale in video quality as we go, right? What you've just witnessed is the basics of the understanding of what the War Altar is and does. But you can do so much more with this. You can place crystals and talismans on it, and you can have things set to represent so many different things in your life and see how they're being influenced, see how you're moved. But you've got to be honest. If you feel something's moving in, you've got to move those pieces. If you feel you've lost a piece, you need to knock it down and then take and set it somewhere for healing purposes, to re-energize it, or even work on it directly over the course of half an hour or even an hour to re-empower it. It's an investment in energy. And if you're not willing to fight a war, if you're not willing to put the time in, the War Altar is not your method. At that point, you need to seek professional help, someone who can do this work for you, because you're not going to be doing the work at that phase. If you're not able to put that half an hour in, then you're just not going to get much out of this. But with that said, if you can put the time in, you're willing to work with this technique, what you have is a flexible method of attack and defense. You can put many different figurines on here to represent many different forces in play. I generally break things down into light infantry, which represents lesser forces I'm calling upon, but in greater amounts, such as angels and demons and things like that. Heavy infantry, which represents my own personal force as I throw into the attacks. I do believe we are the strongest force that we're going to make use of. It can also represent, at times, gods and goddesses that are called upon. And then I usually have some figurines reserved for my own person, and then for other forces that I call upon very regularly, personal guardian spirits and things like that that are much more connected to me than any god or goddess would be, save Thor. I guess I need a Thor figurine to put on my War Altar at some point. There's a thought, right? But within that, you've got to be respectful of the technique and be respectful of what it represents. If this becomes a toy to you in a game, and you're just moving things around because you want to feel like you made a hit, you will gain nothing from the War Altar. The War Altar, in my mind, is the ultimate evolution of mystical warfare, because it combines Poppet work with focusing techniques and energy work, and something that can be updated as things happen, as senses are moved, so that you can see the attack before it lands home on you. So it gives you time to prepare, to move, to disrupt your enemy's flow. You could do this through what's called a battle meditation, where you sit there and you meditate and visualize and feel the flows and currents just as well. But you wouldn't have something that marked progress from day to day. So you'd have to do your battle meditation every day, and you'd have to keep one hell of a log. With this, if you're willing to give up some space in your house, and you're willing to spend, I don't know, $3 to $5 on supplies, maybe a little more, because you may want to mark some of these, the bases or the entire thing, with a little bit of paint to represent special forces, or pick a specific figurine to represent yourself or your foe and give them special colors, or even if you have familiars that you use very frequently, or gods or goddesses you call upon frequently, that would work as well. You may even get special figurines specifically for this. You may get really into using this method. With that, it's still a very low-cost option, but it takes time. If you don't invest power in this, you're not going to get anything out. But if you invest the time, the meditation, the focus, what you have is, bar none, in my opinion, one of the best Poppet work methods for going up against another practitioner. This allows you to go toe-to-toe with whoever you're going up against and at least know what's going on. You can use tarot card readings along with this. You can even use tarot card magic to represent forces in play by putting that on the battlefield. And in that, with those readings, you can then determine where the forces need to be moved if you're not as intuitive. And you can still get a representation that you can track over time. Where the hell did I get the idea for this? War movies, believe it or not. In war movies, especially the old World War II ones, there's always a general standing looking over the field, and he's moving pieces on the field to try and figure out how he's going to plan his next strategic assault. And it got me between that and the nature of what magic is, and the focus being the really important part of magic, that all you would need to do would be focus on such things and then be very honest about where things were and how they were moving, as well as your own power and forces involved. And you could develop a technique that was, well, complete, at least for combat's purposes. This can be utilized against other things. It can be utilized in healing against more vicious things like infections and cancers. It can be utilized against situations and against natural foes, where these forces would represent parts of those natural things. It can be used against spiritual warfare, against spirits and beings that are simply against you. And when you do things like that, or when you go against another caster, expect for pieces to get knocked down randomly, and for that to give you some awareness of what happened too, in ways that your subconscious will not guide your hands. You need to be able to up to the flow to do any of this. If you cannot channel the forces of energy in the universe into you, these techniques will not work. But neither will any other techniques, ultimately. In the long run, you won't have a very high success rate. Because at the end of the day, it's about entering that transcendental state. It's about focus, intensity, and energy. And that's the core of what we teach. That's the core of what we've been teaching at the Labyrinth for forever. I think this is an amazing technique. And I think it gives you a fantastic way of changing the way you do what you do with Poppet work. And play with it, modify it. Try it out if you have the need. If you don't have the need, don't just test it out on some random person. Because likely their natural response will be an energetic backlash, and you may find that that small army put up a much better fight than you expected, and it's just not worth the investment. Remember, you're linking a Poppet to you as well. And a lot of people say, well, I don't want to knock my miniatures over, my figurines representing my forces over, because I can't take a hit. Bullshit. First of all, everyone gets hit, everyone gets hurt. Second of all, if you do that, you remove the truth of it. Now, it's a lie. It's an illusion. And the only thing you'll empower is the illusion of the warfare. So if you feel that you've taken a hit and you don't want to knock one of those figurines over, don't use this technique. My advice to you would be to play video games and avoid mysticism, because you're not ready for it if you can't be truthful. Mysticism requires that you can be truthful to the self in order to utilize it fully. But hey, that's a big part of what it means to awaken the night within, isn't it? So, end of this episode. If I'm leaving you with any thoughts, learn to use tools differently. This is an excellent example. I've had people begging me to go over complete methods or to show some of what I can do or how I do things. And this one is the one that I will get the most praise and the most scorn for. People are going to love and hate this method. And I expect that. My detractor, or detractors, however many there are now, will probably poo-poo this method for being, what would the words I'm looking for be? Too immature and lacking in grounding in classic methods. And I like to remind people that most of our classic methods don't go beyond the 1800s, and even the ones that do, we have no proof. We have authors that have not been put under any kind of peer review saying, I found this grimoire and I translated it. Do you have the original copy? No. Well, shit. Or I interviewed all of these people. Can we find those people? Did you make records, birth records? Did you check up on them, find their death certificates after they died? No, I wouldn't include that in a book. Well, we have more wild stories put to definite in the mystical community in our books and methods than we do actual focus on the hard work and training that it takes to do this stuff. So to my detractors, I'm sorry that you don't train hard enough. And to those that love this video and love this idea and methodology, expect more stuff like this. I love to get into raw technique and method. I very rarely have something I can explain and show so easily. And it's so very hard to convey the nature of the flow of the universe without some kind of representation. So I want to thank you all. If you like the video, like it. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button. I don't care. If you want to support us, make us better, make what we do better, share it. Okay? One like is awesome, be it on Facebook or be it on YouTube. But when you share these kind of videos around to the groups and forums that you're in, the places where you've not seen the video posted, don't reshare it if you've seen it posted there. It makes such a big difference. Beyond thanking you, I want to encourage you to use techniques like this when necessary. I want to encourage you to use them when it can save lives, not just destroy lives. I've always believed that evil men will find ways to do harm, where good men often don't seek the knowledge to defend. So in that, when I do a video like this, it is meant to provide you, good people, and I know there are more of you out there than are evil, ways to awaken the night within and protect what is right.